When Emily told me she was pregnant, I felt like my heart might burst with happiness. I had always dreamed of becoming a grandmother. I pictured myself helping with the baby, cooking warm meals, and being there for my son, Daniel, and his wife. But that moment of joy didn't last long. Her next words hit me like a cold wave. "You'll have to move out now, Linda. We need our own space." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. The house we lived in wasn't just theirs, it was mine too. After my husband passed away, I sold our old home and used most of the money to help Daniel and Emily with a down payment. I moved in with them to save costs and stay close to family. I did everything I could to make life easier for them. Paid part of the bills, cooked dinner every night, cleaned, and made sure the home was warm when they returned from work. But now, I was being asked to leave like I was just a guest who had overstayed her welcome. Emily avoided eye contact after saying it. Daniel stood there silently, his hand resting on her shoulder, like he agreed. That silence cut deeper than any words could. I looked at my son, hoping he would speak up, but he didn't. His eyes stayed low, and I realized then that I was on my own. I went to my room that night and sat on the edge of the bed. The same bed I had slept on since my husband died. My hands shook as I folded laundry and pretended everything was fine. But my heart was heavy. I had given everything I could to this family, my time, my savings, my love, and somehow it wasn't enough to make them want me around. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house changed. Emily barely spoke to me, and when she did, her tone was cold. She started making little comments like, "It'll be nice to finally have the house to ourselves," or "The baby needs a calm environment." I understood what she meant. She wanted me gone. Daniel acted distant, avoiding conversations. It was like he had turned into someone I didn't recognize. I wanted to ask him why he was letting this happen, but I couldn't bring myself to start another argument. I didn't want to be the problem in their new life. So, I stayed quiet and watched them plan their future, a future that no longer included me. Every day, I told myself I'd find the courage to leave. Every night, I wondered where I would go. I had no home of my own anymore, just a few savings and memories of a life that used to feel full. I never thought the woman who called me mom would be the one to push me out. But sometimes life has a way of showing you who truly values you, and who was only comfortable when you were useful. Linda tried her best to stay calm after that painful conversation. She told herself that maybe Emily didn't really mean what she said. Pregnancy could make anyone emotional, she thought. So she decided to stay patient, hoping things would get better with time. She continued helping around the house, keeping things tidy, cooking meals, and trying to make Emily comfortable. She wanted to show kindness, not cause problems. But as the days passed, Linda began to notice the shift. The warmth in Emily's voice disappeared. Small smiles turned into cold looks. Whenever Linda walked into a room, the conversation stopped. The laughter faded, replaced by whispers and awkward silence. It felt like she was walking on eggshells in her own home. At dinner, Emily barely spoke to her. She would pass plates across the table without looking up, her tone sharp whenever she did speak. Daniel noticed, but instead of defending his mother, he tried to ignore it, acting as if nothing was wrong. That silence made Linda feel even more alone. One evening, Linda was folding laundry when she heard quiet voices from the hallway. Emily and Daniel were in their bedroom with the door slightly open. Linda hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the words froze her where she stood. Emily's voice was low, but full of frustration. "Your mother's presence stresses me out. How can I raise a baby in this environment?" The words echoed in Linda's mind. She waited for Daniel to defend her, but he didn't. He just sighed. "I know," he said softly. That was all. Linda's eyes filled with tears. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling it ache in a way that had nothing to do with age or exhaustion. She turned away quietly and went back to her room, holding her emotions inside so no one would hear her cry. That night, she sat in the dark, staring at the framed photo of her late husband on the bedside table. "You'd know what to say," she whispered. "You'd know how to fix this." But he wasn't there anymore, and for the first time, she realized she might truly be on her own. The next morning, she tried to act normal. She made breakfast like always, greeted them kindly, and smiled through the tension. But the smile didn't reach her eyes. Emily stayed distant, scrolling on her phone while Daniel avoided meeting her gaze. Linda didn't argue or complain. She just went about her day quietly, though inside she was breaking piece by piece. The home that once felt safe now felt like a stranger's house. She had given them everything she could, her time, her savings, her love, But now, her presence was seen as a burden. The same woman who once dreamed of helping raise her grandchild was now treated like an obstacle in her son's life. And that hurt more than words could ever describe. Linda could feel the change in Daniel more and more each day. The son who once called her every evening just to check on her now barely spoke. When they were in the same room, his eyes stayed glued to his phone or the TV. He avoided her questions and gave short answers, as if talking to his own mother was suddenly too much. She noticed how Emily's words had started to shape him. He began repeating little phrases that sounded nothing like him. Things like, "Mom, you should rest more," or "You don't have to worry about things here." At first, Linda thought he was just trying to keep peace, but then she realized Emily had been feeding him stories. Small, subtle lies. Things like Linda was too controlling, or that she wanted to make decisions for their family. One morning, Linda was setting the table for breakfast when Daniel walked in, his shoulders tense. He didn't sit down right away. His face looked tired, and he kept rubbing his hands together. Something about his body language made Linda's heart sink. She knew bad news was coming. "Mom," he started quietly, "maybe it's best if you find your own place." For a second, everything went silent. Linda froze, the coffee pot in her hand trembling slightly. "What?" she asked, hoping she had misunderstood. Daniel couldn't even look at her. His voice was soft, almost guilty. "Emily and I just think it would be healthier for everyone. You deserve your own space. And we need ours." Linda stared at him, her throat tightening. "Your own space?" she repeated. "Daniel, this house." She stopped herself, not wanting to sound angry. "You remember, right? I helped pay for this home. Half of that mortgage was from your father's insurance." Daniel's eyes flickered up for a moment, then back down. "I know, Mom. And I'm grateful. But things are different now." Different. That word cut deep. Linda felt the weight of every sacrifice she had made. The money she'd given, the nights she'd stayed up cooking and cleaning, the love she'd poured into making their home feel whole again after her husband's death. And now, she was being told to leave it all behind, like she was just someone passing through. She didn't argue. She didn't cry in front of him. She just nodded slowly, holding herself together even though inside she was falling apart. "If that's what you want," she said softly, "then I won't stay where I'm not wanted." Daniel tried to say something more, but his words faded into silence. He turned away, and that silence between them felt louder than any shouting could have. When he left the room, Linda sat alone at the table, staring at the empty chairs. She realized that her son, the boy she once carried in her arms, was now someone she didn't recognize. And it wasn't because he stopped loving her. It was because someone else had convinced him to forget how much she had done for him. Linda waited a few days after that painful talk, hoping Daniel might change his mind. But he didn't. The house grew quieter, colder. Emily avoided her completely, and Daniel barely looked at her. Every time Linda walked into the kitchen, she could feel she didn't belong there anymore. It wasn't her home now. It was just a place she happened to live in. One evening, after dinner, Linda went to her room and sat on the edge of her bed. She looked around at her things, the old photo frames, the blankets she had crocheted, the few belongings she had left from her late husband. Everything she owned fit into 2 small suitcases. She realized it was time to go. She packed in silence, folding her clothes carefully, trying not to make any noise. It was strange, packing her life away in a home she had helped pay for. Every item she touched held a memory: her husband's sweater, the family picture from Daniel's graduation, the wedding ring she had worn for decades. When she finished, she stood there for a long time, holding that ring between her fingers. She walked to the kitchen, where the soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. She placed the ring gently on the counter, right next to the vase she had given Emily as a wedding gift. Her hand trembled as she whispered, "May this remind you of who helped build this home." Her voice broke halfway through. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. They were the last tears she would cry in that house. She took one last look around, at the walls she'd painted, the curtains she'd sewn, the table where they once laughed together, and walked out quietly. No one stopped her. Outside, the night was calm. The air was cool, and the streetlights glowed softly. She stood there for a moment, holding her suitcase, and whispered to herself, "You'll be okay, Linda." Then she took a deep breath and started walking. She found a small apartment across town, a modest one-bedroom place with creaky floors and thin walls. It wasn't much, but it was hers. For the first few nights, the silence was hard. She missed the familiar sounds, the clatter of dishes, Daniel's voice, even the sound of footsteps in the hallway. But she reminded herself that peace sometimes feels lonely at first. Lonely nights came often. She would sit by the window with a cup of tea, watching the city lights in the distance, thinking about everything she had lost. Yet, beneath all that pain, there was a small spark, the quiet strength that told her she would rise again. Linda promised herself that night that she wouldn't let betrayal destroy her. She had lost her home, her comfort, and the closeness of her son, but she still had her dignity. And she would build a new life, one that no one could take away from her again. The first few weeks in her new apartment were hard for Linda. The rooms felt empty, and the silence pressed down on her. Some nights, she cried quietly, wondering how everything had changed so quickly. But she refused to stay broken. She reminded herself of the promise she made, to not let betrayal destroy her. One morning, she saw an ad on a bulletin board near a grocery store. The local community center was hiring part-time help for their senior activities. Without thinking twice, she wrote down the number and called. A week later, she started working there. Her first day felt strange. She hadn't worked in years, and everything felt new again. The sound of laughter in the halls, the smell of fresh coffee, the chatter of people sharing stories. Her main task was to help with craft sessions and assist seniors with small tasks. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it gave her a sense of purpose. Slowly, Linda began to feel alive again. She taught older women how to make small handmade decorations and helped some of the men with their crossword puzzles. They loved her calm voice and gentle nature. They didn't know her story, but they treated her with kindness and respect, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Over time, the community center became her second home. She looked forward to going there every morning, sharing laughter and stories, and feeling useful again. The people there reminded her that she still had value, that life didn't end just because someone turned their back on you. As the months passed, Linda's days filled with light again. She started smiling more. On weekends, she baked cookies for her new friends or joined them for lunch. She didn't talk about Daniel or Emily, but deep down, a quiet ache remained. She still missed her son, even after everything. While Linda was slowly rebuilding her peace, things at Daniel and Emily's house weren't as perfect as they appeared. The baby had arrived, but instead of bringing happiness, it brought arguments. Daniel often came home tired from work, only to face Emily's constant complaints. She wanted everything done her way, from how the baby was fed to how the house was run. Daniel tried to please her, but nothing was ever enough. Emily criticized him for small things and made him feel like a failure. The stress began to show in their voices and their faces. The laughter that once filled the house was gone. Emily's temper grew worse. She often raised her voice, saying she was the only one doing the real work. Daniel, caught between exhaustion and frustration, started spending more time outside just to get some air. The home that once felt full of promise now felt heavy and cold. While Linda was finding new strength in her quiet, simple life, Daniel was learning that peace couldn't exist in a place built on selfishness. But neither of them knew yet how their paths would cross again, and how everything would come full circle. It was a quiet afternoon when Linda heard a soft knock on her apartment door. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened it, she froze. Standing there was Daniel, his shoulders slumped, his eyes red and tired. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, in a low voice, he said, "Mom, I made a mistake." Linda's heart ached at the sight of him. He looked nothing like the confident man she remembered. His clothes were wrinkled, his face pale, and he seemed drained of all energy. She stepped aside without a word and motioned for him to come in. Daniel sat on the couch, staring at the floor. He looked lost, as if he didn't know where to start. Finally, he said, "Everything's falling apart." His voice cracked slightly, and Linda felt a lump rise in her throat. He went on to explain what had been happening. Emily had spent nearly all their savings on expensive nursery furniture, designer baby clothes, and home decor. It was never enough for her, he said bitterly. She always wanted more, things we didn't need. He told Linda how Emily had started arguing with his friends, accusing them of being a bad influence. One by one, they stopped visiting. "It's like she wanted me to have no one but her," he said quietly. Linda listened carefully, her hands folded on her lap. She didn't interrupt or scold him. She just let him talk, letting the weight of his own choices unfold in his words. He looked up at her, eyes filled with guilt. "I pushed you away for her. I thought I was doing the right thing. But she made me believe you were the problem." Those words hit Linda deeply, but she didn't let her emotions show. She took a slow breath and said softly, "Daniel, I know how love can blind people. You wanted peace, but sometimes we chase peace in the wrong places." Daniel rubbed his face with his hands. "I thought I was building a family," he said, his voice breaking. "But it feels like I lost everything instead." Linda placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "people need to lose peace before they learn what truly matters." He looked at her, eyes full of regret. "Can you ever forgive me, Mom?" Linda gave a faint, tired smile. "You're my son. I'll always love you. But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It just helps us move forward." They sat there in silence for a while, the air heavy with unspoken pain. For the first time in months, Daniel felt safe. No judgment, no shouting, just the quiet understanding of a mother who had been hurt but never stopped caring. When he finally left that evening, Linda stood by the window, watching him walk down the street. She didn't know what would come next, but something inside her shifted. Maybe after all the heartbreak, life was finally beginning to turn, slowly, but in the right direction. A few weeks later, Linda's phone rang early in the morning. She looked at the screen and saw Daniel's name. For a second, she hesitated to answer, unsure of what he might want. When she finally picked up, his voice was shaky but calm. "Mom, Emily had the baby," he said. "It's a girl. I'd like you to come see her." Linda's heart softened instantly. She had dreamed of this moment, holding her grandchild for the first time. Still, a part of her hesitated. Too much had happened between them. The pain was still fresh, and the thought of stepping back into that house made her uneasy. But despite everything, she loved her son. And she wanted to meet her granddaughter. She took a deep breath, got dressed, and carefully wrapped a small handmade blanket she had crocheted weeks earlier. She had made it without knowing if she'd ever get to give it to the baby, but now it finally had a purpose. When she reached the house, Daniel opened the door. He looked tired but managed a small, grateful smile. "Thanks for coming, Mom," he said softly. Linda nodded, stepping inside. The moment she entered, she felt the change. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It was quiet, too quiet. No warmth, no laughter, no sign of joy. The walls she once decorated with family photos now looked bare. Even the smell of the house was different. Emily was sitting on the couch, holding the baby. She didn't look up right away. When she finally did, her expression was distant. "Hi, Linda," she said flatly, her tone cold. Linda gave a small nod. "Hi, Emily," she replied softly, trying to keep things peaceful. She stepped closer to look at the baby, a tiny, beautiful girl wrapped in pink. Linda's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "She's perfect." Emily didn't respond, just adjusted the blanket around the baby. The tension in the room was thick, but Linda ignored it. Her heart was focused on that little face, innocent, pure, unaware of the pain between the adults around her. Daniel stood by quietly watching. "Do you want to hold her, Mom?" he asked gently. Linda hesitated for a moment, afraid Emily might object. But when she didn't, Daniel carefully placed the baby in her arms. The moment Linda felt the baby's tiny weight against her chest, something inside her healed a little. All the hurt and loneliness seemed to fade, replaced by warmth she hadn't felt in months. She looked down at her granddaughter and smiled. "Welcome to the world, little one," she whispered. "You're already so loved." Emily stayed silent, her eyes avoiding Linda's. The air in the room was still heavy, but Linda didn't let it ruin the moment. She held the baby close, memorizing every detail of her small face. After a while, she gently handed the baby back to Daniel. "Take care of her," she said quietly. "And take care of yourself." Then she turned to leave, her heart full and aching at the same time. As she stepped outside, she took a deep breath. The house behind her felt cold and lifeless, but she smiled faintly. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel bitter, just grateful that love, even in its smallest form, could still exist amid all the brokenness. The months that followed were heavy for Daniel. What was supposed to be a fresh start as a father slowly turned into a storm he couldn't escape. Emily's behavior grew worse after the baby was born. She complained about everything: the house, Daniel's job, even the smallest mistakes. Arguments became daily, and soon, their home was filled with shouting instead of laughter. Daniel tried to make it work for the sake of their child, but Emily had already pulled away. She stopped talking to him except when it was about money or the baby. One afternoon, while Daniel was at work, she packed her things and left. She took the baby with her, and when Daniel checked their joint bank account, most of the money was gone too. Days later, a divorce notice arrived in the mail. Daniel stared at it for a long time, unable to believe how fast everything had fallen apart. The house, which once felt like a dream come true, now felt cold and empty. Every corner reminded him of the choices he had made. Choices that had driven his mother away and left him alone in the same walls she had helped build. At night, he sat on the couch surrounded by silence. The nursery was untouched, the little clothes still folded, the crib unused. Sometimes he walked into that room just to sit in the dark. He thought about the times his mother had been there, her laughter in the kitchen, her calm voice, her warmth. He realized then how much she had truly done for him, and how easily he had let it all go. One rainy afternoon, Daniel drove across town. He didn't know what he would say, but his heart led him back to his mother's door. When Linda opened it, he looked nothing like the man she had last seen. His eyes were tired, his face pale, and his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom," he said, "I shouldn't have let her push you away. I lost everything because I didn't value the one person who truly cared." Linda stood there quietly, her eyes soft but unreadable. She could see the regret written all over him. For a moment, she said nothing, just let him speak. He told her how Emily had left, how the house felt empty, how he couldn't sleep at night because of the guilt. His voice broke when he said, "You were right, Mom. You were always right." Linda took a slow breath. "I never wanted to be right," she said gently. "I only wanted you to be happy." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said quietly. Linda looked at him, her expression softening. "Forgiveness isn't about who deserves it," she said. "It's about letting go so both hearts can heal." He nodded, tears falling down his face. In that small apartment, the one she had built from nothing, mother and son sat together in silence, both knowing that though the past couldn't be changed, love still had a way of finding its way back home. Linda could see the pain in Daniel's eyes, but she didn't let bitterness take over. She had every reason to remind him of what he had done, every reason to say, "I warned you," but she didn't. Instead, she chose compassion. Deep down, she knew he had already learned his lesson in the hardest way possible. Over the next few weeks, Daniel started visiting more often. Sometimes he came just to talk, sometimes to help fix things around her apartment. Slowly, they began rebuilding what had been broken between them. Linda made him tea, listened to his worries, and gave quiet advice when he asked for it. But this time, she didn't step in to solve everything. She let him face the reality of his own choices, only offering support, not rescue. One evening, Daniel told her he was thinking of selling the house. "I can't live there anymore," he admitted. "It feels like a shell, like everything good in it is gone." Linda nodded. "Then let it go," she said softly. "A house means nothing if peace doesn't live in it." Her words stayed with him. He began to rebuild his life slowly. He found a smaller apartment closer to his work and started saving again. It wasn't easy, money was tight, and he still carried guilt, but Linda could see small changes in him. He was calmer, more grounded, and most importantly, more aware of what truly mattered. Even as they grew closer again, Linda made one thing clear. She wouldn't move back in with him. Daniel offered several times, saying he wanted her to live comfortably, that he could take care of her now. But she always smiled gently and shook her head. "Daniel," she said one evening as they sat together, "I love you, but love doesn't mean losing yourself. It means standing strong, even when others don't see your worth." He looked at her for a long time, realizing how much strength it had taken for her to build her life again after everything. She wasn't saying it out of pride. She was saying it out of wisdom. She had finally learned to draw a line between love and self-sacrifice. Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand now," he said quietly. "You gave everything for me, and I didn't see it. But I see it now." Linda smiled, a mix of sadness and pride in her eyes. "That's all I ever wanted," she said. From then on, their relationship became something new, honest and respectful. Daniel visited often, not out of guilt but out of genuine love. He would bring his daughter along, and Linda's small apartment, once so quiet, began to fill with laughter again. She didn't have her old home or the life she once imagined, but she had something better: peace, independence, and the love of a son who finally understood her worth. And that, to her, was more than enough. A year passed, and life looked very different for Linda. She had worked hard, saved carefully, and finally bought a small but beautiful house near a quiet park. It wasn't grand or fancy, but it was hers, built from her own strength, her own choices, and her own peace. Every corner of it carried a sense of calm that she hadn't felt in years. On the porch, she hung a small wooden sign that read, "Home is where respect lives." To anyone else, it might have looked simple, but for Linda, those words held deep meaning. This house wasn't just a place to live. It was a symbol of her journey, of how far she had come from the days when she felt unwanted in the very home she helped build. She filled her days with small joys, morning walks in the park, tending to her little garden, and reading by the window in the evenings. She sometimes thought about the past, but not with anger. The memories still hurt, but they no longer controlled her. She had learned that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant freeing herself from the weight of old pain. Daniel often came to visit, sometimes on weekends, sometimes after work. But this time, the visits felt different. There was no guilt in his eyes anymore, only love and respect. He would help her fix small things around the house, and they would share tea and talk for hours. The bond they had lost was now stronger than ever. Not because of pity or regret, but because it was built on understanding. One sunny afternoon, Daniel arrived with his baby daughter in his arms. The little girl's laughter filled the air as Linda held her close. Daniel smiled and said softly, "Mom, I hope she grows up to be as strong as you." Linda looked at him with warmth in her eyes. She didn't say much, just smiled. Because deep inside, she knew that strength wasn't something you talked about. It was something you lived. Her son had finally seen that. As the baby played on the porch, Linda sat back and watched the sun setting over the park. The light filtered through the trees, golden and peaceful. She thought about everything she had been through, the betrayal, the loneliness, the heartbreak, and realized it had all led her here, to this moment of peace. She didn't need revenge or apologies anymore. What she had gained, independence, dignity, and self-worth, was far more powerful. The pain that once tried to break her had, in truth, shaped her into someone stronger and wiser. As the wind gently brushed her face, she whispered to herself, "Sometimes the best revenge isn't anger, it's peace." And as laughter from her son and granddaughter filled the evening air, Linda smiled, because she had finally come home, not just to a house, but to herself.